Whoa.
Whoa. We'd have to hand out the Apocrypha. Let me tell you a story. Diane worked for the City of Hope, which was a large charity. And her boss wanted to have a Hannukah party. The City of Hope is Jewish. The boss was Jewish. Some of the staff was Jewish, so she wanted to have a real big party. And so she took and she said to Diane, would you talk to Michael about preaching on Hannukah? Well, I was a good Lutheran boy. I went to a seminary. I was at a seminary for 4 years, got a Master of Divinity degree, and I had no idea what Hannukah was. So, I took, and I, this good Lutheran boy, got a Catholic Bible. I got a Catholic Bible, and I brought out the Apocrypha, and I read the story. And lest you think that I do not listen to comments, I have heard from several people this week, oh no, you're not going to preach on that again, are you? And they're right. I am going to deal with Hannukah, but I want to bring out the things that happened without trying to preach the story, because the story takes hundreds of years. In the 7th century, the 10 northern tribes of Israel were sent into captivity. They went with the Medo-Persians. In the 5th century, the Jewish people went to Babylon. 70 years later, the Jewish people came back to Israel under Ezra and Nehemiah, and they took and they rebuilt the wall around the city of Jerusalem, which made it a legitimate city, and then they rebuilt the temple. If they had not done that, Christ could not have been born. He could not have come. He could not have been circumcised in the temple. He could not have followed the laws that he gave Moses. He could not have died as the Passover lamb. He could not have been resurrected and saved us from our sins. And in the interim between the Jewish people coming back and dealing with the temple and the Christ coming, there is something that took place that you and I should be aware of. When Satan is going to destroy the church, he always works through the culture. When Satan wants to destroy the law of God, he will always work through the culture. He will always work through what's going on. We see what's going on. Did you realize 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was this tremendous battle of whether you're allowed to say Merry Christmas or not?
Yes.
Now, you're a group that is Messianic, so I can share this with you. It's very interesting that there was a battle over saying Merry Christmas, because Christmas is a Roman Catholic creation. It's not a biblical feast. So there's a massive fight going on whether you can say Merry Christmas when Christ wasn't born on Christmas. But that's where the fight is. And Satan will always try to do this. And to the Jewish people, in 137 BC, they came from Syria with the idea that what we'll do is we'll put a veneer over the whole world. With most tables, this is not a good example. This is not a good example. The tables they have back there stacked against the wall, you start off with a bunch of wood chips. You grind them all up and you put them in glue. You make a table, then you put a veneer on the top. You put some kind of smooth surface on it so it looks like wood, and you make a table out of it. That's what the Greeks wanted to do to the world. They wanted to take all the nations, put them together like wood chip, glue them together with all of the stuff of Alexander the Great, and then put a veneer of how they could be members of the world's society. if you are paying attention to what's happening in our culture, you are seeing that in our culture, there is a massive battle to destroy the American Constitution as we know it, because they would like us to join a new world order. They want us to become part of a great society, part of a great swamp. They want that to become something that's real, and America and the Bible and the Constitution not. And this is what happened in 137 BC. They came in and they decided that they would get rid of all of the law of God, and they would take and they would replace it with culture of men. Be attuned to this because it's taking place in our world today. They're trying to do the same thing. Now, I promised two people I would not preach on this. So I'm not going to preach on it. But what I do want to do, I want to ask some questions, and I want to see if you know the answers. Okay? What is the meaning of Hannukah? Why do we call it the Festival of Light? Does anybody know?
Because of the one candle that was lit for a day and it ended up burning for the
Yes. Yes. They had enough oil to cleanse the altar, to cleanse the temple, and they had to light the menorah, the 7-branch candelabra. They had to light it for 7 days, and they had enough oil to light it for 1 day. So the priest said, let us light it, let us trust God. And it became the miracle of Hannukah because it burned.
For 8 days.
For 8 days. Yeah. Now, they will tell you, the rabbis will tell you, Orthodox, I don't know if the Orthodox do, but Reformed people say, well, this is just kind of a myth for kids. I don't believe it was a myth for kids. I believe it was an act of God's divine sovereign nature. Getting ready to cleanse the temple so Yeshua could be born in that temple. So that he could come to the temple on the 8th day and be circumcised. He could come when he was 12 years old to Passover. He could argue with all the rabbis, all the priests, all the doctors in the temple. He was getting bar mitzvah.
Very true.
He was putting himself under the law. And he said to his mother, and she said, we've been worrying about you. He said, did you not know I would be in my father's house? I have to argue Torah with these old men who don't know what they're talking about. You know. So he had to come, and then he had to, when he was 33 years old, he had to come to the temple, and he had to be put to death as the Passover lamb by whom? By the priest. So the miracle, as Raj brought it out, the miracle of Hannukah was that the oil multiplied itself. And I believe that in you, the oil of the Holy Spirit, the unction is there. The unction is there. The unction is there. He is coming closer. Expect him to get real in your life. Give him that life so he can get real in you. Because the miracle of Hannukah is the miracle of light that it came. The miracle was that the oil replenished itself. May you be replenished by the Ruach HaKodesh. It is also called the Festival of Light. It's called the Miracle of Light. It's called the Festival of Light. And I explained this last week, 2 weeks ago. What is swaddling cloth?
It's the cloth that the priests have used numbers of times and been washed, and they're just old priest clothing.
Yeah. We never knew this as Christians who read the Bible, but swaddling cloth is a priest's robe, and they had heavy work. They had to slaughter animals, they had to lug carcasses, they had to carry bodies, they had to move the entrails, they had to skin them and they had to do all this stuff. And so the robes that they wore, the white robes, got absolutely filthy, And they had to take these robes and they had to bleach them with a strong, strong lye bleach. And you know, it was heavy cloth to begin with, but after 10 years of washing and dirtying and washing and dirtying, it got pretty beat up. And so swaddling cloth was the priest's robes that were dirtied, were washed, were re-washed. Have any of you ever been to Mexico?
Actually, yeah.
You know, the thing that astounded me when I went to Mexico, you had all these people wearing all these beautiful white clothes in dirty, dusty streets. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Their clothes were, and we went up to somebody and said, how do you get your clothes so clean? And they said, we use lye. They have a natural lye that they use to boil the clothes, and they get them white, and then the street gets them dirty, and then they wipe them again. Well, that's, I believe, what the priest had to do. And Christians never knew this, but when it says that Yeshua was put in swaddling cloth, he actually was wrapped in old priest's robes. Now, boy, that puts a swing to the story, doesn't it? Yep. He was actually put in priest's robes. Now, where would someone, an innocent maid like Mary, where would she get this kind of stuff? Where would she get priest's robes? Well, her uncle was Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. Yeah. And he was about over the hill by the time she came to see him. So he had a bunch of robes that he was willing to give her. And she had another uncle named Joseph of Arimathea, who actually was a member of the council. He went to Pilate and he said, I want the body of that criminal so I can put him in a tomb. And that made that Joseph of Arimathea was persona non grata from that point on. He was just absolutely, he was off the council, he was out of that, he was out of culture. He had to leave, and he and some other Christians, other Messianics, went to Spain, and then they went to Britain. He traveled, he got away. But it's interesting, the swaddling cloth. Now, what did they do with the swaddling cloth that they didn't wrap Jesus in? Because you had hundreds or thousands of priests slaughtering animals, making all this swaddling cloth, doing all this dirty work, taking the blood of the animals and the sins of the people and getting it all over their robes and then whitening the robes. Okay, what did they do with the rest of the swaddling cloth? I mentioned this several weeks ago. Did you catch it?
Genies.
Yeah, they burned it. They used it and filled with oil.
Yeah.
So that the oil would last longer.
Yes.
They had two large tubes. They were probably 20 feet tall, and they were 6 to 8 feet across. And they were brass, because brass can take a tremendous amount of heat. They would stuff all these rags into this thing. Then they would cover it to the top with olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, to the top. They would move this then into the front of the temple, because the temple is a little square building where only the priests could go. Then there was a court for the men of Israel. Then there was a court for the Gentiles. Then there was a court where they had a general bazaar. And so they would put these things in these courts. It's 20 feet tall. And as I mentioned, Israel, if you want to look at Jerusalem, do the letter Shin. Look at your hand. That is Jerusalem. You've got 3 valleys, the Kidron, the Tyropean, and the Kishon. You got 3 valleys. And between them you got 2 mountain ranges. One of these mountain ranges is where, on the top, the temple was. So they would take these 2 big brass pillars. They would fill them full of all these old swaddling cloths. They would fill them with oil up to the top, and then they'd light it at night. And they say that at night you could see 20 miles in any direction. You could see it shining off the gold roof of the temple. You could see it shining off the limestone with the mica schist into it. You could see the temple glowing white and glassy and beautiful. Because that's why they called it the Festival of Light. It's interesting, I heard a rabbi this morning. And the rabbi was saying, we believe that you Christians have all these lights on the trees and the lights everywhere because you copy our Festival of Lights. And then the commentator asked, and what about all the gifts that you give? He said, well, I believe we copied that from you. We copied that from Christmas, you know. And he was very, very nice and very outgoing, but you take a look. And so, and in order to commemorate this, we have the Hannukah. And the Hannukah is an 8-branched candelabra because there were 8 days when it took to purify the temple. In the center, there is one 9th candle. Does anybody know what it's called?
Yes, the shamash.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does anybody know, except Macaulay and Diane, does anybody know what the shamash candle is all about?
Yeshua's servant. Yeah.
It's the servant candle.
It's the servant candle. You light it, then you use it to light the other candles. You take and you light it, and so you light it 7, 8 times. You light it time and again. You light it, you light it, you light it, and it gets smaller and smaller. You have to replace it first, you have to replace it quick. And you use it to light all the other candles. Who is the greatest servant who said, I am the light of the world? Yeshua. Yeah. Yeshua said, I am the light of the world. And he said it when he was standing in the temple by these big pillars of light. He said, I am the light of the world. Him that comes to me shall not walk in darkness. And he laid it out. So the Shema, or the servant candle, is extremely important. It is the lesson that we have. Okay. I don't want to preach on something that everybody's heard a bunch of times, but the Maccabees were the people who fought the Greeks off in order to bless, in order to cleanse the temple. Does anybody know what Maccabee means? Hammer. Hammer, yeah. And there's 2 meanings for that. Because Judas Maccabee was known as the Hammer. His father was a priest who started a rebellion, and Judas took over, and they called him the Hammer. There's 2 parts to that. The first part is that he hammered the enemy. The second part, and I think this is the important part, when he started fighting, when they started fighting the Romans, when they started fighting all of this, they had only farming implements. They really didn't have weapons. The Greeks didn't take them very seriously, so they let their guards get drunk. They didn't put guards up. They had parties at night. They moved their camps in. They set them up, but they didn't set up guards. So what happened is they went in and they destroyed the enemies at night. And after they had killed them, they took their swords, they took their bows and arrows, they took their spears, they took their shields. Then they had real weapons. But when they started off, what they had was simply farming implements. And the hammer, Judas, the hammer, hammered the enemy, but he reminded us that they did it from this. They did it from that. Barbara?
Barbara's right here.
Okay, I'm almost ready to quit, so we're going to light the candles. So if the kids want to stay for that, be good. Okay. We know what the hammer means. Maccabees. Okay. Okay. We have a tradition in our temple here that we take and we light the Hannukahs and we turn off all the other lights. And you'll be amazed at how beautiful it is. So if we could have some people volunteer to light. It has been requested that we light first just the first three, because tonight is the third night. And then after they have burned for a little while, we will light all of them, because then you get to see the full glory of it. So how do we want to do this?